My name is Seraphina Moon, and I never envisioned my life unfolding within the hushed solemnity of a courtroom, the scent of old paper and polished wood mingling with the silent anxieties of those who sought justice or, perhaps, escape. For 3 years, I had navigated the currents of my life in Port Blossom, a small coastal town where the mist often clung to the pine trees like a whispered secret, with my daughter, Lily, as my bright, unwavering North Star. But the path had led me here, to this moment, a place I had resisted with every fiber of my being until Lily's own innocent questions about her father became too poignant to ignore. The world had known me as a quiet woman, one who found solace in the intricate patterns of wildflowers and the steady rhythm of the tides. Marcus Thorne and his mother, Eleanor, however, had painted me with a different brush, that of a calculating opportunist, a liar who sought to tarnish their esteemed family name and ensnare their successful son. For 3 long years, their denial had been a shadow over my life, a constant, quiet erosion of my spirit. Yet, in the fertile ground of motherhood, a different kind of strength had taken root, one that now held me steady as I faced them across the sterile expanse of the courtroom. The room itself felt like a stage for hushed dramas, light filtering dimly through tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Judge Evelyn Reed, a woman whose calm gaze seemed to miss nothing, sat elevated, a symbol of the impartial truth I so desperately sought. I wore a simple dress the color of sea glass, carefully chosen, the nicest I owned, while Eleanor Thorne, seated ramrod straight behind Marcus, was a study in understated wealth, a silk blouse the color of cream, a string of pearls that gleamed softly at her throat. Marcus, my Marcus from a lifetime ago, looked impeccably polished in a dark suit, yet there was a tension around his eyes, a subtle strain that his confident posture couldn't quite conceal. He avoided my gaze, a habit he'd perfected over the years. My heart beat a steady, if somewhat too loud, rhythm against my ribs. I had placed my faith in a simple, scientific truth, contained within a sealed manila envelope on the judge's bench, the DNA results. They were the beacon I had steered towards through years of stormy doubt and whispered accusations. I knew what they would reveal, for I had never wavered from the truth of Lily's origins. Marcus was her father. Today, I prayed the world would finally acknowledge it. But then, Judge Reed, after a morning of meticulous procedure, shifted her papers. Her expression, usually unreadable, held a new, unidentifiable note. "Before we unseal the genetic testing results," she announced, her voice resonating with a quiet authority that stilled the room, "there is an additional piece of correspondence the court has reviewed. It pertains to digital communications from the defendant, Mr. Thorne, from the period in question." A ripple of unease, almost imperceptible, passed through Marcus. His hand, resting on the polished table before him, tightened. His lawyer, Mr. Silas Blackwood, a man whose sharp intelligence was usually conveyed with an air of unshakable composure, canted his head, a flicker of surprise in his keen eyes. Eleanor Thorne's regal stillness was disturbed by a slight frown, a whisper of confusion marring her otherwise smooth brow. I felt not the icy dread the old story described, but a profound stillness, a sudden, sharp clarity. It was as if the wind had dropped, and every sound, every movement became intensely focused. A premonition settled over me. The carefully constructed facade Marcus had hidden behind for so long was about to crumble, perhaps in a way far more complex and revealing than simple paternity. 3 years earlier, the world had felt softer, painted in the gentle hues of possibility. I was Seraphina Moon then too, but a version of myself not yet tempered by betrayal, a young woman sketching local flora in a worn notebook at the Morning Lark Cafe. Port Blossom's unique wildflowers were my passion, a quiet study I pursued between shifts at the Anchor and Hearth, a cozy restaurant by the harbor. Marcus Thorne had walked into the cafe, not with a crash, but like a warm breeze, charming, confident, with a smile that seemed to understand my quiet intensity. He'd noticed my botany sketches, asked about my work at the university's small herbarium, and spoken of his own ambitions for Thorn Development Group, his family's legacy. He made it sound like artistry, shaping the landscape with respect and vision. For a season, it was idyllic. We drove along the winding coastal roads, the scent of salt and pine filling the air as we talked for hours. He listened, truly listened, or so I believed, to my dreams of one day creating a comprehensive botanical guide to Port Blossom's fragile ecosystem. He encouraged my studies, celebrated my small successes. His attention felt like sunshine after a long winter, and I, starved for warmth, basked in it. Then came the Sunday luncheon at Willow Creek Estates, the Thorn ancestral home, a stately colonial on Sycamore Hill, surrounded by gardens so perfectly manicured they felt almost sterile. Eleanor Thorn greeted me with a smile that was technically flawless, but held no genuine warmth. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as Marcus's, assessed me with a polite but thorough scrutiny that left me feeling like an uninvited weed in her prize rose bed. Throughout the meal, her questions were precise, designed, I felt, to highlight the differences between my modest upbringing and their established world. She spoke often of Marcus's previous girlfriend, Isabel, who was from such a good family and was, of course, pursuing a suitably impressive career in law. Marcus has always possessed a generous spirit, Eleanor remarked, her voice like cool silk as she carved her salmon with practiced elegance. Sometimes, perhaps, a little too generous with those who may not fully appreciate his standing in our community or the path already paved for him. Marcus had laughed a little too quickly and changed the subject. But the message had been delivered, a subtle chill that settled in the ornate dining room. I was not, in her eyes, suitable. After that, the light began to fade. Marcus became more elusive. Dates were canceled, calls went unanswered for longer stretches, his excuses always plausible, urgent business, family commitments. When I voiced my hurt, my confusion, he would reassure me that his mother was merely protective, that she would come around. I clung to those reassurances, wanting to believe, because the alternative, that I was merely a fleeting diversion, was too painful to contemplate. I was falling in love, and love, in its early, hopeful stages, can be a powerful sedative against uncomfortable truths. Then came the night that altered the landscape of my life irrevocably. It was late, well past midnight, and a summer storm was raging outside, mirroring the turmoil Marcus brought with him when he appeared at my small, sun-starved flat above the old bakery. He was distressed, his usual polished veneer stripped away, revealing a vulnerability I had only glimpsed before. He wouldn't specify the cause of his agitation, only saying he needed to be somewhere real, somewhere the air felt clean, away from the suffocating weight of expectations. We talked until the storm passed and the first pale light of dawn touched the rain-washed windows. In those precious, fragile hours, he was the Marcus I first knew, tender, honest, searching. He spoke of his love for me, of a future he wanted to build, a life different from the one his mother envisioned for him. He held me as if I were his only anchor in a turbulent sea. 6 weeks later, 2 faint pink lines on a test strip confirmed what my body already seemed to know. A quiet joy, tentative and fragile as a new seedling, unfurled within me, intertwined with a thread of deep apprehension. When I told Marcus, his initial reaction was a sunburst. He held me close, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered of names and nursery colors. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to dream of a shared future, a family. But when he shared the news with Eleanor, the frost descended. Her reaction was swift and brutal. She demanded irrefutable proof of paternity, her words laced with accusations of deliberate entrapment. She threatened to sever Marcus financially, to dismantle the future he had always taken for granted, unless he handled the situation with appropriate discretion. Marcus began to withdraw, but this time it was different. The warmth was replaced by a chilling distance. He started to echo his mother's doubts, questioning the timing, questioning me. Eleanor's influence was a constant, insidious pressure. She began to subtly, then more overtly, poison the well of public opinion in Port Blossom, painting me as an opportunist who had preyed on her son's good nature. By the time Lily was born, a tiny, perfect being with a tuft of dark hair like Marcus's and my own wide, thoughtful eyes, Marcus was a shadow of the man I had loved. He came to the hospital, held his daughter for a scant 10 minutes, his face a mask of discomfort and anxiety, and then he was gone. Eleanor never came. She never acknowledged the birth of her granddaughter. For the next 3 years, I raised Lily alone. My botany studies were put on hold indefinitely. I worked double shifts at the Anchor and Hearth, took in mending, did whatever I could to keep our small boat afloat. Each month was a precarious balance of rent, groceries, and childcare. Marcus sent money, sometimes small, impersonal sums routed through his lawyers, always on the unspoken condition that I not contact him directly. Eleanor, meanwhile, ensured that Port Blossom society understood there were unresolved questions surrounding Lily's paternity. My daughter, my beautiful, innocent Lily, was an unresolved question. The breaking point arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon. Lily, then nearly 3, looked up at me from her picture book, her brow furrowed with a child's profound seriousness. "Mama," she asked, her small voice earnest, "why don't I have a daddy like Sam at playschool? How do you explain to a child that her father existed but chose not to be present? That his own mother preferred to pretend she didn't exist rather than accept a reality that didn't fit her pristine narrative?" In that moment, watching the confusion in Lily's clear eyes, my quiet endurance transformed into a steely resolve. It was no longer just about me. Lily deserved to know who she was, to have her identity acknowledged, not whispered about in hushed tones. And I deserved to share the responsibility of her upbringing, to no longer carry this weight alone. I decided to file for legal acknowledgement of paternity and for child support. Not for a reconciliation with Marcus, for that bridge had long ago crumbled into dust, but for Lily. For her truth. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn, the air cool and damp with sea mist. My stomach was a knot of apprehension. 8 months of preparation, of forms and meetings with Ms. Nora Evans, the kind, steady legal aid lawyer who had taken my case, had led to this day. Nothing, however, could fully prepare me for the emotional gravity of it. I dropped Lily off at Mrs. Peterson's cottage, our warm-hearted, silver-haired neighbor. Lily, clutching her favorite worn bunny, looked up at me, her eyes reflecting the morning light. "Are you going to find my daddy's smile today, Mama?" she asked, her innocent words a poignant twist in my heart. I kissed her soft hair, promising I'd be back with good news, though I couldn't bring myself to define what that news might be for her. The family courthouse, a grand, slightly austere building overlooking the harbor, felt imposing. Ms. Evans met me at the entrance, her calm presence a small anchor in the churning sea of my emotions. She was overworked, I knew, her resources meager compared to the legal artillery the Thorns could command, but her belief in my case, in me, was unwavering. When we entered the designated courtroom, Marcus and Eleanor were already seated with Mr. Blackwood. Eleanor, in her cream silk, surveyed me with a cool, appraising glance that still, after all this time, managed to make me feel small, like a wilting daisy. Marcus looked straight ahead, his profile sharp and unyielding. The man who had once sought refuge in my arms, vulnerable and lost, was nowhere to be seen. This Marcus was a fortress, impenetrable and cold. The proceedings began. Judge Reed explained the order of events. Eleanor Thorne was called to testify first. She moved to the stand with an air of dignified composure, her voice clear and modulated as Mr. Blackwood guided her through her testimony. She spoke of the Thorne family's long-standing reputation in Port Blossom, their contributions to the community, and the unfortunate necessity of this hearing to establish clarity and protect their legacy from unsubstantiated claims. She never used Lily's name, referring to her only as the child. Each carefully chosen word was a small, polished stone cast in my direction. Then Marcus took the stand. This was the moment I had steeled myself for. Mr. Blackwood led him through his version of our history, a brief, casual acquaintance, a misunderstanding on Ms. Moon's part. When asked about the night Lily was conceived, Marcus looked directly at Judge Reed, his voice steady. "Your Honor, I was not with Ms. Moon that night. In fact, I was not in Port Blossom. I was attending a Thorn Development Group business retreat in Stonebridge that entire weekend. I have hotel confirmations and meeting itineraries to substantiate this." Mr. Blackwood then presented the documents, crisp printouts, official-looking letterheads. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The dates he cited for the Stonebridge retreat were indeed the weekend Lily had begun. For a terrifying moment, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. Had I been wrong all this time? Had my memory, my certainty, been flawed? Eleanor Thorne allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile of satisfaction, a slight inclination of her head towards an acquaintance in the public gallery. Marcus looked relieved, almost vindicated. Ms. Evans leaned towards me, her voice a low murmur. "Serafina, are you absolutely certain about those dates? If there's any ambiguity." Her concern was gentle, but it pricked at my already fragile confidence. I closed my eyes, forcing myself back to that stormy August night. The scent of rain on dry earth, the rumble of thunder, the desperate vulnerability in Marcus's eyes when he'd arrived at my door. The way he'd held me, as if I were the only solid thing in his world. The raw, unplanned intimacy that had followed. I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones, that night had happened. That was the night Lily, my precious daughter, had been conceived. "I'm not wrong, Nora," I whispered back, my voice firmer than I felt. That night happened exactly as I remember it. Judge Reed called for a brief recess before the DNA results would be presented. I slipped out into the small courthouse garden, the scent of late-blooming roses heavy in the air. I called Mrs. Peterson. Hearing Lily's bright, happy chatter on the other end of the line was like a balm to my frayed nerves. Her laughter, pure and untainted, reminded me why I was there, why I had to see this through. This wasn't about vengeance or even about Marcus. It was about Lily and the truth she deserved. When we reconvened, Judge Reed's demeanor seemed to have subtly shifted. Instead of immediately reaching for the manila envelope, she consulted a new set of papers on her desk. My heart began a nervous flutter. This was unexpected. "Before we proceed to the matter of the genetic analysis," Judge Reed stated, her gaze sweeping the courtroom, "I must address some additional documentation that has come to the court's attention during the recess." I glanced at Ms. Evans, who looked as perplexed as I felt. Mr. Blackwood was whispering urgently to Marcus, whose earlier composure was visibly cracking. He looked, for the first time that day, genuinely alarmed. "In matters of disputed paternity," the judge continued, her voice even, "the court sometimes deems it necessary to subpoena auxiliary records to ensure a complete tapestry of the circumstances. These can include digital footprints, electronic communications, which may provide crucial context to the testimonies provided." It was then I saw Marcus's color drain away, leaving his face a stark, pale mask. His hand, I noticed, trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. Eleanor stared at her son, then at the judge, her regal composure beginning to fray into visible confusion and a dawning apprehension. "Your Honor," Mr. Blackwood rose, his usual smooth delivery now tinged with an uncharacteristic urgency, "we were not apprised that such records had been subpoenaed. We would request an opportunity to review any new evidence before it is formally presented." Judge Reed regarded him with a calm, unwavering gaze. "Mr. Blackwood, these records were obtained through established legal protocols as part of the court's comprehensive inquiry. The defendant and his counsel will, of course, have the opportunity to respond after the evidence has been presented." Marcus leaned forward, whispering something fierce and desperate to his lawyer, but Mr. Blackwood could only offer a helpless shake of his head. Whatever lay within those records, Marcus clearly knew its power to dismantle his carefully constructed narrative. The atmosphere in the courtroom had become electric with unspoken tension. Eleanor Thorne's imperious certainty had vanished, replaced by a mother's anxious gaze fixed upon her son. Judge Reed held up a single sheet of paper. From where I sat, I could see lines of text, though the words were indistinct. "We have here," she announced, her voice cutting through the sudden silence, "a text message recovered from the defendant's mobile phone, sent to an individual identified as Mr. David Carter. The message is timestamped 2:47 a.m. on August 12th of that year, the specific night Ms. Moon attests conception occurred, and the night Mr. Thorne testified he was in Stonebridge." Marcus made a small choke sound, like air being punched from his lungs. Mr. Blackwood was shuffling through his briefcase, his movements agitated, clearly searching for some legal maneuver to deflect what was coming. For the first time all morning, a fragile seedling of hope pushed through the anxious soil of my heart. The truth, perhaps, was finally about to find its voice. Judge Reed adjusted her spectacles, her gaze resting on Marcus for a moment before she began to read. The courtroom was so still I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Eleanor had stopped fiddling with her pearls. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a terrible, dawning understanding as she stared at her son. The text message reads as follows, Judge Reed declared, her voice clear and measured. Quote, "David, just left Serafina's. Atmosphere heavy. Mother absolutely cannot know I was there. Please confirm you'll say I was with you at the Stonebridge Lodge all weekend if anyone asks. This is complicated." End quote. A collective gasp, soft but audible, rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor Thorne's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes, now filled with a horrified comprehension, still fixed on Marcus. He shot to his feet, his face flushed, no longer pale. "Your Honor, that message is taken entirely out of context. It doesn't mean what it implies." "I can explain." Mr. Blackwood quickly, but gently, pulled him back into his seat. But Judge Reed was not finished. She held up another document. Mr. Blackwood seemed to almost deflate, his shoulders slumping slightly. "There are several subsequent messages from Mr. Thorne to Mr. Carter over the following days and weeks that further illuminate the situation." Eleanor was no longer looking at Marcus with confusion, but with an expression of profound, wounded betrayal. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of her shock, "what have you done?" He refused to meet her gaze. Judge Reed continued, her tone unwavering. August 13th, 4:52 p.m. "David, thanks for backing me up on the Stonebridge story. Mother bought it. Oh, you big time." August 28th, 9:15 a.m. Panic stations. "Serafina thinks she might be pregnant. If she is, and if she says it's mine, we absolutely have to stick to the Stonebridge alibi. Mother would. I can't even imagine." September 5th, 11:30 p.m. She is pregnant. Mother is already asking questions about my mood. Don't breathe a word about Serafina to anyone, especially not her. Each message landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. A wave of nausea washed over me, mixed with a bitter taste of vindication. The Marcus I thought I had loved, the one who had seemed so caring, so genuine that stormy night, had been systematically erasing me, erasing our connection, erasing his own child, from the moment he left my apartment. This was not a man swayed by a powerful mother. This was a man actively, calculatingly deceiving everyone, including her. Marcus was on his feet again, heedless of Mr. Blackwood's restraining hand. "Your Honor, these are private communications. They are being twisted. They don't prove paternity, and they certainly don't prove I lied under oath about my whereabouts." Mr. Thorne, Judge Reed's voice, though still calm, now held a distinct edge of steel. You testified, under solemn oath, that you were not in the company of Ms. Moon on the night of August 12th, and that you were, in fact, in Stonebridge. These messages, sent from your own device, directly and unequivocally contradict that sworn testimony. They establish a clear pattern of premeditated deception regarding your actions and your relationship with Ms. Moon, designed to mislead not only her, but this court, and, it would appear, your own family. The judge then reached for the manila envelope. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She slid it open with a small, precise letter opener. The paternity test results, conducted by an independent accredited laboratory, show a 99.98% probability that Marcus Thorne is the biological father of the child, Lily Serafina Moon. Judge Reed looked up from the report, her gaze settling firmly on Marcus. Mr. Thorne, you are indeed the father of Ms. Moon's child. And you have committed perjury in this courtroom. It was Eleanor who broke the stunned silence. But it was not with shame, or even with quiet dismay. It was with a profound, sorrowful anger, directed entirely at her son. She rose slowly, her elegance momentarily forgotten, her face a mask of pain and fury. Marcus. Her voice, though not loud, trembled with the force of her emotion. You lied to me. For 3 years, I defended you. I disparaged that young woman. I allowed my friends to think the worst of her. I turned my back on my own grandchild, all because I believed your lies. Her voice cracked. Our family's reputation, our name, which you claimed to be protecting, what is it worth, Marcus, when it is propped up by such deceit? By such cowardice? Marcus tried to approach her, his hand outstretched, his face a mess of shame and panic. Mother, please. She recoiled as if struck. Do not touch me. That beautiful little girl, Lily, has been without a father, without a grandmother, for 3 years because you hadn't the courage, the common decency, to tell the truth. Judge Reed gently but firmly restored order. She then proceeded with her ruling. Marcus was ordered to pay full child support, retroactive to Lily's birth, a sum that would finally lift the suffocating weight of financial insecurity from my shoulders. He was granted visitation rights, but they were to be supervised, and only after he completed court-mandated courses on co-parenting and accountability. Mr. Blackwood made a subdued attempt to argue for leniency, for unsupervised access, but Judge Reed was resolute. Mr. Blackwood, she stated, your client has demonstrated a profound and sustained pattern of deception. Trust, in this courtroom and in his role as a father, must now be earned through consistent, positive action, not through legal petition. As the hearing concluded, a complex tapestry of emotions wove through me, immense relief, a quiet, bittersweet vindication, and an unexpected ache of sadness. I had won, yet watching the Marcus I had once cherished unravel, revealing a core of dishonesty I had never suspected, was a painful revelation. Walking out of the courtroom, the cool marble floors no longer felt intimidating. The air in the hallway seemed lighter. I clutched the court orders in my hand, documents that affirmed what I had known all along. Lily would have her father's name, her heritage acknowledged. More importantly, she would have the security and support she deserved. The most unforeseen moment occurred as Ms. Evans and I were gathering our papers. Eleanor Thorne approached us. For a heartbeat, I braced myself, expecting perhaps a final, cutting remark. Instead, her eyes, red-rimmed and filled with tears, met mine. Ms. Moon. Serafina, she began, her voice thick with emotion. There are no words adequate to express the apology I owe you. For 3 years, I chose to believe a narrative that was easier, more convenient. I allowed my sons, misrepresentations, to color my judgment, to harden my heart. I was wrong. So profoundly wrong. She paused, dabbing her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. I have a granddaughter. A beautiful, innocent granddaughter whom I have denied, and whom I have allowed to be misunderstood. Because of my blindness. Because of his deceit. She took a shaky breath. If you could ever find it in your heart, when you feel the time is right, I would very much like the chance to be the grandmother Lily deserves. To try and mend what has been so badly broken. I looked at this woman who had been the source of so much quiet pain and saw not an enemy, but another victim of Marcus's elaborate deception, albeit one who had also been a perpetrator of cruelty born from that deception. Mrs. Thorne, I said softly, you believed your son. In some ways, I imagine many mothers might have wanted to do the same. No, she said, her voice firm despite the tears. No, that is too easy an excuse. I should have listened more carefully to my own instincts. I should have sought the truth with an open mind, not with a closed fist. I should have given you, a young woman facing motherhood alone, the benefit of the doubt. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small, embossed card. This is my private number. If, or when, you feel ready. Marcus then approached, his face a portrait of desperation and shame. Serafina, please, can we talk? I was scared. The pressure. I never meant for it to go this far. I held up my hand, not in anger, but to create a necessary space. I looked at him, the man who had caused so much wreckage, and spoke the words that had rested in my heart for 3 long years, not with venom, but with the quiet strength of my hard-won truth. Marcus, I said, my voice calm and steady, you had 3 years. 3 years to be a father to Lily, voluntarily. 3 years to be honest, with me, with your mother, with yourself. You chose a different path. Now, the court has mandated your involvement. You will do it because you are ordered to, not because you freely chose to. For Lily's sake, I hope you learn the profound difference between those two things. His face crumpled. There were no excuses left that I wished to hear. The time for excuses was long past. That evening, picking Lily up from Mrs. Peterson's warm, cinnamon-scented kitchen was one of the purest moments of joy I had ever experienced. She ran into my arms, her small body radiating warmth and trust. Mama, she chirped, did you find the smiles today? Did you bring good news? I knelt and hugged her tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. Yes, my love, I whispered. Yes, Mama has very good news. Some things are going to be much brighter for us now. She wouldn't understand the complexities yet, the legal battles, the emotional undercurrents. But she would grow up knowing her mother had stood for truth, for her, and that our small world was now a little more secure, a little more just. The child support meant I could finally breathe. It meant I could realistically pursue finishing my botany degree, perhaps even open the little workshop I'd dreamed of, sharing my love for Port Blossom's unique flora. It meant music lessons for Lily if she wished, good shoes, a small vegetable patch in our sunny backyard, and the quiet peace of a growing education fund instead of the gnawing worry about next month's rent. But the most significant victory wasn't financial, nor was it the legal acknowledgement. It was the quiet affirmation of my own worth, my own truth. I had faced the storm and found an unexpected strength within myself. I had learned that self-respect isn't a gift given by others, but a garden cultivated within, watered by integrity and courage. The path ahead for Marcus and his mother was their own to navigate. Perhaps, in time, genuine remorse would lead to genuine change. Eleanor's apology felt like a fragile first step on a long road. For Marcus, the journey would be steeper, mandated by law rather than inspired by conscience, at least for now. My hope for Lily's sake was that he would eventually find his way to authentic fatherhood. As for Lily and me, our path forward felt clearer, bathed in a gentler light. The lessons were etched deeply, that truth, however long buried, possesses a resilient power, that standing firm in one's own integrity, even when isolated, is a victory in itself. And that sometimes the most inspiring journeys are not about changing the world, but about reclaiming oneself, piece by quiet piece, and teaching your child that her voice and her truth will always matter. The sea mist over Port Blossom seemed to lift a little that evening, revealing a horizon full of quiet promise.